Hi everybody, my name is Ryan Mangan and welcome to this session migrating your remote desktop service environment to Azure Virtual Desktop. Today we're going to be talking about on-premises environments, particularly RDS, remote desktop services, and then porting them over to Azure Virtual Desktop. Some of the considerations, why would you want to do that, and some kind of tips and tricks from myself. So let's get started then. So I said my name is Ryan Mangan and my Twitter handle is @RyanMangan and my blog is ryanmangansitblog.com. I've been in the EUC for some time and obviously there's quite a few articles and things I've covered on Azure Virtual Desktop and RDS over the years. So feel free to reach out to my blog, ryanmangansitblog.com, for more info, that is. So before we kind of get on with the session, I wanted to point out that I released a book in March this year on mastering Azure Virtual Desktop, which covers lots and lots of stuff. And if we get time at the end of this session, I'll run through some of the beneficial parts for migrating. There's two sections. The first part is the packet discount code. So anybody in Europe, you can get 20% using the code AVD220 via the packet website. And obviously, if you're on Amazon.com in the US, unfortunately, I'm not responsible for the kind of discount codes, but all of the US part can earn 25% discount by using the code 25AVD. So there's lots of reasons why people want to move to Azure Virtual Desktop from on-premises workspace solutions. And one of the kind of main ones is total cost of ownership. So, there's a compelling argument as well. There's quite a few compelling arguments really why you would want to move. But one of the challenges you've got on premises that you've got to do all the work, the networking, the wiring, everything is on you. The capital cost of the hardware, training, you name it, upgrades, continual effort. There's a lot of effort involved. Whereas cloud is very appealing to most because all you have to take care of is the logical, the components inside your subscription. And then obviously enhanced security as well. Some of the security features and the capabilities are almost too expensive in some on-premise environments, whereas you can achieve that level of security by leveraging technologies like Microsoft Azure. And then another real big factor is Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session is only available in Azure. So if you wanted to take advantage of that native experience of a Windows desktop operating system for VDI using multi-session, then you need to use Azure Virtual Desktop for that. RDS has been kind of technology I've worked on for many years and has its pros and cons. And it can be complex and it's very challenging to scale sometimes, as well as the problems with maintenance and connection brokers, especially in larger environments. So for those who are coming to the end of their life cycle of on-premises hardware for remote desktop services, it's probably a good time to start looking at the advantages of moving to Azure Virtual Desktop. And obviously that leads me on to the introduction to cloud economics. I tend to kind of cover this in quite a few of the presentations recently, just to kind of set some context on why people want to use cloud technology over on premises. And the interesting thing is when you buy on-premises hardware, quite commonly when you buy it as a capital investment. So you're buying everything up front, the servers, the network, the storage, cooling, all of that kind of stuff is physical, and there's a capital cost for that. But then when you deploy the services, which you don't deploy straight away, so you've actually got a cost of it sat there in boxes. When it's deployed, you've then got things to consider that, is it just continually idle? Is it predictable? Are you only using 20-30% of that resource? So you've only got 70% of unused resources on per box per se, which you've paid all that money on. And that obviously means, from a cloud perspective, that you can really reduce down the costings by using pay as you consume. And so the cloud model of, consuming what you actually use is a much better way of obviously keeping costs down. The other interesting thing about cloud is that you don't have to go out and spend a massive capital investment. You can basically, it's a pay as you consume model, which is fantastic if you want to kind of, handle a monthly billing model rather than capital. And some of the quite common areas now is cross-charging with the organization for specific applications or SaaS services, as well as costing per user per head, so calculating roughly what the technology costs within a business per user per head based on cloud consumption. There is obviously unpredictable, where it can fluctuate up and down. It's very hard on premises to guess that, but the benefits of using cloud technology allows you to scale up and scale down in them particular times. So, there's no real reason why you would not consider cloud in the modern day, because it's becoming more and more a common strategy to kind of handle the ever challenging issues with obtaining hardware, physical hardware, due to you know industry shipping challenges, the various different reasons, but also looking at it from a financial model, where organizations now are adopting what we call cloud first strategies, because it's much easier, it's much more cost effective in the long term to put resources in the cloud. So when we look at considering VDI, we look at on premises, and this is an example here. The diagram denotes an example remote desktop services environment. And as you can see, there's lots of physical components and virtual components there, which are all managed and controlled by the customer on their co-location or on their own data center. Obviously, scaling this out in a physical world is complex. Having resiliency, using server-based multi-session is completely different to using Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session, so the experience is different. Idle capacity, as I've already covered, and then the unpredictable usage as well. So, it's very hard to kind of scale up if you have a burst of users needing more resources. You have to go and budget that in, and that could actually cause strain on the business and potentially lots of IT tickets during that period of time. And when we're looking again at the considerations for cloud over on premises, I've set out 3 particular areas: infrastructure, licensing, and sort cost. So infrastructure, Windows 10 multi-session and Windows 11 multi-session, you can't obtain that unless you're on Azure Virtual Desktop. Cost of storage, networking, physical, as we already covered, and then the ability to shut down VMs to save costs. So cloud gives you much better flexibility in terms of cost optimization, and you'll probably hear cost optimization quite a lot in Azure Virtual Desktop, because there's lots of things you can do with that using native tools and third party as well. And the big thing, as I kind of alluded earlier, one of the big benefits is that there's no upfront costs when it comes to the cloud infrastructure, because it's all pretty much logical, and therefore you to kind of spin it when you need it. Licensing, Microsoft did away with AVD, the RDS CAL for the Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session. You now only need one of the approved Microsoft 365 licenses for Azure Virtual Desktop, which allows you to kind of consume and access that resource. And also, again, that's further cost optimization associated with that. Total cost of ownership, the need to obviously manage all these RDS components is no longer there. Microsoft's Azure Virtual Desktop Services is like a centrally managed backplane. So all of the kind of brokerage, the web, all of that is handled by Microsoft as a platform service. And there's no action from the customer within their subscription on that. And then same with the physical compute and storage, that's all again handled by Microsoft. So you're responsible for your virtual machines, your images, your applications, all that kind of stuff. And in terms of patching, monitoring and management, again, you're only responsible for the logical components within that cloud subscription. So let's look at some of the kind of pros and cons. Why would you want to migrate to Azure Virtual Desktop? Well, looking at on-premises, and there's some good ones. So there's also RDS on Azure. That's a good one to point out. So looking at here that you manage everything, right? So you take care of absolutely everything. That's the physical network and the data center, and then the virtualization control plane. And unfortunately, that's quite a lot of work in itself. Never mind the top part where you've got the network deployment, session hosts, application security. All of this is a job, and then you've got all of this down here, and this is obviously where the cost is. So when you're looking at Azure Virtual Desktop, just jumping over to the far right hand side, you can see that you still take care of identity, devices, application security, the deployment, the configuration, network controls. However, Microsoft have taken all of the physical challenges away from you, making the experience much simpler and easier for you as an organization to kind of to get on with the day-to-day. So, you should be focusing on security, the deployment, and obviously the application side of things, rather than trying to kind of diagnose, fix any kind of physical stuff. And obviously you can do RDS in Azure, but you still have quite a lot to do, in the sense that you've got to kind of handle the virtual control plane, which is the RDS brokerage, the web access, and the gateways, which can be quite a painful challenge to have as well, especially with some of the issues which may occur. So the 7 core steps to kind of migrating, really. Just this is just an example, really. When you're looking at, the steps, we've got prerequisites, assessment, the review, the base AVD environment. So basically doing a foundational setup, testing the migration, and then migrating to production. So we're going to test using like a pilot proof of concept and then a full-blown migration. So first of all, when you're looking at Azure Virtual Desktop, before you can do anything with Azure Virtual Desktop, you need to make sure that the inside the subscription, the provider is registered for Microsoft Desktop Virtualization, as you can see here. And there is some, it's covered in the book, and it's also covered in some of the publications I produced previously, which you can access from Microsoft's website on obviously kind of quick start to Azure Virtual Desktop. You need to also decide whether you're doing Azure Active Directory or you're doing Active Directory domain services, like a hybrid with synchronization to Azure AD. And obviously there's pros and cons to each. Assessment. So the biggest thing with the migration is assessing, understanding your current state, and obviously moving over to the target platform. But you need to look at applications, profile disks, image configurations, any kind of database connections. And to do that, you can use Microsoft's native tools like Azure Migrate and the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, or you can be using some of the third parties like Lakeside to kind of assess. But the most important part is kind of gathering that information so that you can put a plan together of what you need on the other side. So when we're reviewing the assessment data, we need to be looking at quite a few things. So first of all, the virtual desktop performance, how much utilization on a day-to-day is required? What is the resourcing? Then you've also got, the applications used. Which applications are they, and who they're used by, and what is the likelihood that they're going to need to be moved? Then you've also got resource utilization based by the users and the user persona. So, what is the kind of scaling and the number of users per session host? The resource consumption per user, we've obviously kind of covered that under resource utilization averages. And then concurrent users, how many people are going to be on at that particular time of day? If you've got different countries, different regions logging at different times of day, what are the peaks and what are the kind of scaling mechanisms you'll need to put in place to kind of cover them, them scale ups and scale downs. And then also limit time, runtime, profile disk data size as well. So are you going to be taking existing data from profiles and moving them over, or are you going to be building new profiles and then they're going to reset them up on the other side? And then applications. So applications, there's over 7 trillion in the world today, over 7 trillion, I should say. And one of the challenges with a lot of organizations is when they get to the migration, they do all of the assessing, but they don't look at the applications, or they have problems with the application in the sense they've got missing installation media. They don't know the applications in the environment. And it's very important that you do the assessment stage at the beginning of the process. So you fully understand what applications you've got, what are the requirements of the users, who the application owners are, and how you're going to get them over. So if you don't, you'll get all the way through the process of building the environment ready to go, but then don't have the applications to deliver it onto the platform itself. There's also challenges like application compatibility, the ability, differences between common and departmental. Is it specific for a small group of people, or is it required for everybody? Then obviously how you manage control. Are you going to be using FSLogix app masking? What about how the user accesses the application? Is it going to be via a full desktop, or is it going to be via a remote app? There's various different things. And can I use modern application delivery technologies with the applications I'm deploying onto that platform? Traditional ways to delivering applications to VDI. So as you can see here, I've got 3 images. In some organizations, they've got 100, and each image is for each department. So they've got the common applications, which is across the board. So it could be Microsoft Office and other kind of printing software. You've got sales applications on this particular image, finance of them, which is great. But then you're going to have to update each image. So if you've got 100 images, you need to do updates, application updates on each single image. So is this a really good idea? What is the impact from a resourcing perspective? Whereas when you're looking at Azure Virtual Desktop, this is what you can do. So you've got a common single image with all of the common applications installed on there. And you can use technologies like, FSLogix profile containers attached to the profile. And then you can use MSIX app attach through Azure Virtual Desktop to attach them applications to that specific user in that specific security group, and also use FSLogic's app file containers for them applications which you want to offload to disk and access by a group, but obviously cannot use MSX app attach for. So the truth of it is, when it comes to workspace migrations, the biggest challenge, which is the typical challenge, is applications. Making sure that you assess and obtain all the information about the applications and understand how you're going to deliver them applications onto that. The majority of projects become elongated or stalled, typically due to the applications. So if I can give you one little bit of advice today, when you're looking at potentially migrating or looking at carrying out an assessment, make sure that you do a full audit and assessment of the applications within the environment before continuing with workspace, because you can't design the output for the workspace and the final experience for the user without understanding who's getting what applications. So on to section 4, creating the virtual desktop environment. So you've got to have a baseline with everything you do, so you need to build something to kind of understand performance, understand how the applications, how the users will perform and behave in that environment. You can assess as much as you want, but real life scenarios, pilots, proof of concept testing is required to ensure that you kind of fully understand. Some organizations may have different experience to you. Cloud is unpredictable in the sense that you are not guaranteed a specific rate. There is slight fluctuations in performance overall. So what I recommend is you build your core Azure Virtual Desktop environment first. Set up the storage. You've got Azure files, Azure NetApp files. Depending on the organization, the size of the organization, you may decide that Azure NetApp files is the answer for the larger organizations. Are you going to be using dynamic application delivery, also known as MSX app attach, app masking, FSLogic's app file containers, or other application delivery technology? That's important to understand. How are you going to deliver your apps? Are you doing pooled or personal desktops? Obviously, pooled multi-session gives you the ability to have multiple users on one single host, which obviously reduces down and consolidates them users and reduces cost. However, there is applications out there and certain requirements for some users, like developers, where they need their own persistent desktop to do their work. They also may need admin rights to kind of download and do certain things. So how are you going to handle the security? How are you going to handle all of that? Are you going to basically provide all the applications on a share for that user so they can install them and configure them themselves? Lots of things to consider regarding pooled and persistent depending on that user group. And then creating a host pool. So basically you're going to create a simple host pool initially on step 4 and do some basic testing. Network performance, general usability. What is the experience like for the user? Is it serviceable? When we increase a few more users, add a bit of load to that, what is the output? Is it good enough? Is it acceptable for these users? And once you've got that information, you can then proceed to the next steps. So if you are wanting to essentially deploy just a test or a proof of concept AVD environment fairly quickly, there's a feature in Azure Virtual Desktop called Getting Started, and quite frankly, in the lab world, it's one of my favorite tools because you can very quickly deploy an environment using this. And obviously this little demo here on screen I'm going to show you quickly, shows us within 5 minutes as deploying an environment. So go to the Azure Virtual Desktop page, click on the Get Started wizard and start populating the details, the resource group, the location, and the details you need to fill out. I'll just speed up a little bit as well so we can get going. If you haven't got an Active Directory domain set up already within Azure, it can create one for you. But obviously in this case, I am using an existing one already pre-set up. I'm just going to use a default template image, and I'm going to just put a random prefix in there for the naming of them. And you can specify all of the bits you need for a number of virtual machines, etc. on there. But like you can see here, it's just a form. Fill out the form with the requirements, the configuration, and you can go ahead and start with that process. You can do additional scriptings and auto assign users as well. So you fill out the form, make sure obviously the review comes back as validated and everything's okay, and then you can proceed with creating And then it'll take a couple of minutes for you to provision that test AVD environment. And as you can see, it goes through the process of deploying that for you. Once it's done, he says once it's done, speed it up a little bit. You can go to the newly deployed host pool. You can see my host is in there. It's active, it's green, which means it works. And I can then go ahead and start getting a user on there to test, which is fairly straightforward. So I'm going to now connect to that new environment. And this is what I spun up. So approximately around about, can take anything from 8 to 20 minutes to deploy using the Getting Started wizard. And it's a fairly straightforward process. If you've already got an Azure environment with an Active Directory configured, you can have a pilot sample Azure Virtual Desktop environment up in anything up to 8 to 20 minutes, which is pretty good, right? It takes care of the storage, FS logics, all of that for you out of the box as well. So there's no need to, at this stage, go ahead and do all the fancy kind of configurations and design it. If you did decide to kind of scale out from this, you can use the Getting Started. But if you're a stickler like me, you may decide to do a little bit more customization and things. And obviously this is just checking to make sure that the environment's working and things like that. So I'm going to basically look at the AVD, also known as the WVD URL tool. And this will tell me if everything's configured okay and for us to connect and use. So this will just give us an output. If there's any errors, the WVD agent URL tool, also known as the AVD agent URL tool, will tell us if there's any problems with communication in the Azure environment. As you can see, everything's accessible with nothing not working, which is great. So long and short of it, using the Getting Started feature is pretty useful. Cool. So that then brings us on to testing. So it's not just testing the platform itself, it's also where the users are located. Because if the users are not located or the users don't have a low latency or they have a high latency, then that's an issue in itself. So how your users connect, the bandwidth, the ping rate, all of that information, the round trip time is what I'm referring to. That can have a bit of an issue. You've got to go through all of these sort of things. You can choice of migrating user profiles or creating new in FS Logics. Like I said, there is scripts and tools out there to take user profile disks in RDS and convert them into FS Logics disks. Then you've also got to look at your application migration. Are you doing MSI, MSIX, MSIX App-Attach, line of business applications. So if you've got things like Sage and the database is on premises, but everybody's accessing it via AVD, is there going to be an impact to performance? Is there going to be a latency when running processes with a SQL database, etc.? All of that sort of stuff. All of these things need to be tested. Media redirection, AVD, Microsoft Teams AVD redirection as well. And then once you've done all of that and you're happy and you've got a working solution, which is great, everybody's happy, really like the solution. The truth of it is that we're still not ready yet. We need to then go and migrate to production. So we need to be looking at, the connection for the users. It's different to remote desktop services. It won't be an RDP file or a different type of, a third-party tool or a thin client as such. It's going to be using Microsoft remote desktop client, slightly different. So there needs to be some familiarization. There might need to be some training to the users so they're aware of that. Departmental groups and migrations. It's probably wise not to do a full company migration. Group migration makes more sense. As you're moving the users over in groups, obviously looking at if you are using the original UPD disks and transferring to FS Logics profiles, you may need to run batch processes to transfer the profile disks from RDS over to FS Logics. You can use Azure Runbooks under a schedule for that as well. And then you've also got to configure, well, it is recommended you configure the Azure Virtual Desktop Insights using Azure Monitor to ensure you can monitor any activity, any errors, or any performance issues which may occur. Because as you start loading more onto the environment, there might be some tweaking and optimization required to ensure you have the best performance, but also cost optimization as well. Because if you've got the facilitation of 1,000 desktops and only 3 people are logged on, you need to be scaling down because you're paying a lot of money for them resources just to sit there. Then after migration, and I've already kind of alluded to cost optimization, and to be fair, cost optimization is a continual process. You will continue to do this throughout. You know, can you, when they release new CPUs and new compute resource into Azure, is it better using AMD over Intel's much better? So do we, same price, do we change to AMD EPIC rather than the AS rather than DS chipsets to kind of get better performance and same pricing? If we do change to AS, can we reduce the number of hosts and put more users on because of the improved performance? Possibly. What about auto-scaling, scaling plans, increasing, decreasing during peaks and troughs of the day? And then also using monitoring for Azure Monitor any performance, particularly on feeds, connections, and host registration or any errors. Also automation as well. So we mentioned about Windows updates and the potentially effort involved on premises for all the effort. Can we automate some of the common updates to the image, like using Azure Image Builder to automatically spit out a monthly new image, which can be tested before it's rolled out to production with all the latest updates. And then obviously using benefits like Defender for Cloud, can we take Microsoft Azure's technology and use it further to enhance security for our organization? And that's the sort of things which you should be considering after migration. And when we look at cost optimization in a little bit more detail, there's also something called, I can't even say it, so apologies in advance, Ephemeral Disks. Cost versus performance. And I've done a lot of research on this in the past, and I've got a really good slide here, which I'm going to run through various different kind of tests. So as you can see, I did ASDS, Cloud PC, and then Windows Server. And the 2 lines is the Ephemeral Disk, blue line is the blue base, and then the AMD with Premium Disk. The truth of it is I have seen better performance using Premium Disks. However, if you're offloading applications to offloaded storage using the app, file containers or MSI's app attach, it's not really too much an issue, and Ephemeral Disks are the way forward. However, if you've got very intensive applications which require a lot of IOPS, you may consider using Premium Disks to achieve that bang for buck. You'll also note from this information, as you can see here, that the AMD chipsets provide much better experience for users within Azure. And the point here I'm actually trying to make is that on premises, you can do performance testing and get a baseline. You know, that's the performance baseline. In the cloud world, it's unpredictable in the sense it can change. This information I've collected here is averaged on based of a number of tests. So you might not get the exact each time due to obviously how cloud changes. Each hypervisor, every time you deallocate and reallocate that VM, might be on a different socket or a different bit of hardware. You don't get guaranteed it's pulled on the back end. And as you can see here, I've seen best results using AMD. And the second point is using Ephemeral Disks is great because obviously you don't pay for the disk, it's free because it's using the cache of the host. But the important thing to remember is if you've got intensive applications, then it might not be the answer for your organization. So there's a few options there. But using AMD versus Intel, as I said on the previous slide, the price point is the same, but you may be able to get more users from a condensity perspective using AMD. Scaling plans. So previously, Microsoft, you needed to use PowerShell and set up some scripted actions to scale up, scale down, unless you're using third-party tools, which I'll come to in a minute. But there's now scaling plans within Azure Virtual Desktop under the host pool, which you can configure scaling up and scaling down, and configure a load balancing algorithm to take care of that for you, including off-peak and peak. So if you want to, if everybody finishes at 5 o'clock, but there's a few remote workers, you can reduce your host pool down from 100 down to 2 or 3, subject to the number of people needing to use it. If you have got different time zones where there is a gap of 7 hours. You can reduce the pull down between them 7 hours to reduce cost as well. The truth of it is, there's two I've seen and played with. One's called Hydra and the other's called Nerdio. Nerdio is very advanced and takes care of absolutely everything. So if you are using a large environment, you may want to look at Nerdio because it has some very advanced features, and it's a very strong player in terms of workspace orchestration for AVD. It pretty much covers everything. There's also Hydra, which I've played with, which allows you to kind of do scheduling when the VMs are powered off, the disks are changed, and Nerdio can do the same. So depending on how far you want to go with cost optimization, it is very much worthwhile looking at the likes of third-party tooling to kind of further improve cost A, and B, sizing, performance, and the benefits around that. Being able to kind of automate and monitor performance through these third-party tools is very useful. If you want to do it from native Azure Virtual Desktop, there's a little bit more work involved for you guys to write scripting functions and a bit of development possibly as well to kind of pull through that sort of information. And obviously, as I alluded to previously about monitoring using Azure Virtual Desktop, some of the monitoring and the insights is very powerful. You get some really good information based on people connecting, errors, and issues associated with them errors. So if you are experiencing issues with performance, go straight to the insight section and do a bit of digging here. If you need advanced information, you can use this Custo querying language to pull further information out and do further diagnostics to kind of have a deeper insight into them particular issues. But Azure Virtual Desktop has incredibly good logging capabilities. And I did mention Azure Image Builder, so the ability to automate, I call it Image Factory, effectively basically customizations, updates, and push out various different services, updates to that core image, and then spit out a golden image again, and then distribute that by the Azure Compute Gallery now, not Azure Shared Image Gallery. That's changed recently, well, 6 months ago. And then when we're looking at business continuity and disaster recovery as well, so when we're looking at this, one of the big benefits of using Azure Virtual Desktop over an on-premises solution is you can have a disaster recovery in the same day or in a couple of hours. It's fairly simple to do, and obviously scaling out of that across different regions is a similar sort of process of deploying you first. It's just making sure that you take care of user profiles between the two regions and applications as well. So as you've seen here, you can do Azure Virtual Machine Replication. The Azure Compute Gallery already can replicate between two sides, so you can do that fairly quickly. The different storage as well. So you can basically have read access on the other side for storage, as well as you can use for large organizations, NetApp cross-region replication. And one of the really cool technologies which I'm a big fan of is FSLogic's Cloud Cache, which enables you to basically cache the profile across and synchronize it between different storage repositories. So just to kind of summary rundown of everything we've kind of covered in this session, make sure you have all the prerequisites covered, including the application assessment. A successful migration, you need to make sure you've done a full migration assessment because you need to understand applications, user, and general data. Simple as that. Apps, for me, have seemed to be the kind of, in the enterprise world, have been the common slowdown for all projects. So if you haven't got a good understanding of the applications you've got or an application strategy, I advise you invest the time here on the project, because this will be the stumbling block. This will what slow you down. This is what's going to cause the problems of getting you from on-premises into the cloud. And there's nothing worse than being out of support with deprecating technology on premises, and you've got a brand new environment sat there where you can move things over. So, definitely invest the time in the kind of migration assessment piece. Always advise just to build and sound out the environment. So understand what you need, tweaking, understanding the kind of behavior, performance, impact of them, pilot users, test users, just to see what's going on. Even if it's technical, just spinning up applications and loading and taking a gauge of whether that experience is good enough is worthwhile doing, because then it allows you to take that information and put it into a kind of low-level design where you can build out the foundations of how it's going to be for moving forward, scalability and disaster recovery as well. And then the other thing as well is, I didn't kind of cover this, but I'll cover it now, is that you're moving from from remote desktop services to Azure Virtual Desktop. So the feature difference between the two is pretty different. So it doesn't, just because AVD has all these features, it doesn't mean on version 1 of the release to the business that you need to have it all bells and whistles and singing and dancing and every single feature enabled. It may be worth, splitting out the transition to AVD over a period of steps. Sometimes it's best just to get them working what they currently have in terms of feature set, and then slowly increasing them features as you move along with releases. Bear in mind, you still need to do Windows updates and rebuild the images and update the gold images, so there's nothing stopping you adding these features slowly during their maintenance cycles. And then cost optimization. Truth of it is, you can't really cost optimize in POC because you don't actually know what the consumption is, what the actual workload is going to be. But obviously, once you're in production, you can continue to keep tweaking and gathering live data to help you make the right decisions. And it is very, very difficult to predict utilization without actually having live data. It doesn't matter what anybody says to you about using kind of UAT testing. Without live data, it's very hard to prove. A few years back now, or a couple of years back, it wasn't a few, I saw an organization move to Azure Virtual Desktop. And because the application was on premises, the database, and the client was on AVD, that they were trying to produce 250 purchase orders a day, but obviously it reduced down to 180 approximately because there was a delay between talking to on premises and the client application in AVD. So it's important that you test with users, because the users who use the applications day in, day out know more than anybody else of the impact. It doesn't matter what tooling you use, you'll still require them users to give you an output of whether it's suitable or not. And then monitoring, so using the insights and Azure Monitor provides a holistic view of everything that's going on in AVD. You can do advanced querying as well using Custo if you want to pull information out, and that allow you to kind of gather further information on particular issues for the user. And then being cloud technology and access to scripting and all the PowerShell runbooks, the massive capability here to kind of create automation features and functions in the sense of updating new images, pushing out services, various different things where you can do that. And then obviously, welcome to the world of Azure. You get to take full advantage of the security features and services which allow you to achieve a higher hardening scope than you possibly could as quickly as you could as on premises, and also with the reduced cost of that as well. And then disaster recovery, using Azure Virtual Desktop for disaster recovery. There's no more buying more tin in a second location, connecting VPNs and all that kind of stuff, physically driving there, as it were. It can be done in a matter of hours, minutes, days, in the cloud. So flexible and very quick to scale. So that concludes the session today. If you've got questions and you want to kind of reach out to me with RDS and migrating to Azure Virtual Desktop, feel free to kind of reach out to me on my Twitter handle at Ryan Mangan, or via LinkedIn, other social media, or via my blog as well, which you can message me on. But yeah, I hope that was insightful and kind of dip your toe into migrating RDS to Azure Virtual Desktop and some of the kind of benefits from it. I'm sure you probably, one of the key takeaways was obviously consumption versus capital and cost optimization within the cloud. And also, just as a reminder, if you want to kind of find out all about design migration, take the exam. Everything is covered in Mastering Azure Virtual Desktop book, which was released March this year. And you can see here, there's 2 discount codes as I covered at the beginning of this session. The first one was, the packet website, which is AVD 220, which is from the 30th of August 2022 to the 30th of September 2022. And then obviously, if you're in America, or you have access to Amazon.com, you can take advantage of the Amazon code of 25AVD. So unfortunately, as I said at the beginning of the session, 20% for Europe, but I don't control this. It's just how the vouchers have been produced. And then obviously in Amazon.com, you're lucky enough if you can access that, get the 25%. And just to kind of give you a quick insight of the book and some of the kind of areas covered within the book, and there's 19 chapters. What you can do is, if you come and have a look at this section here, and planning Azure Virtual Desktop architecture, you can see within the first there's 4 chapters listed here, which talks about designing Azure Virtual Desktop, designing the identities and profiles, and then implementing the networking, the storage for AVD in there. And it's quite well detailed with assessments, how you should kind of set out your environment, some of the tools out there to help you kind of get migrated, and some kind of groupings, how you group users. So there's lots of information there. So if you are looking at Azure Virtual Desktop and the migration, there's a lot of information here which to help you. Something which you wouldn't get in the videos which have been produced in the community. There's a lot more granular detail and field experience being put into this book. So I hope you enjoyed this session. If you do want to know more, as I've said, feel free to reach out. And again, thanks everybody for your time. Have a good day.